Wow. America. Can't believe it's been almost 17 years since I've stood on this ground. 17 years. Feels like I'm still running. My name is Henry Box Brown. Some of you might have heard of me. It doesn't really matter. Where was I at? Well, when the Fugitive Slave Act in 1850 had changed, I had no other choice but to continue my escape and run. And I ended up in New England, in England. There, I lived the rest of my life. Wrote a book, started a whole new world. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how it all started. I was born somewhere around 1815 in Louisa County, Virginia, on the Barrett plantation. And while I was there, my family and I, my parents and my brother and my sister and I, we were house slaves for the Barretts. And life for us was pretty good for slaves. We were treated well, we had favor. Believe it or not, we were well-dressed, well-fed, always had shoes on our feet. We could read, we could write. My brother and I had liberty to travel anywhere we wanted in the county. Favor. I'll give you an example of the favor that we had. My brother and I would travel about 5 miles down the road to the next plantation, which was owned by a gentleman by the name of Dr. Johnson. And once we get there, when we would get there, do you know what Dr. Johnson would do? He would take us fishing. And we would fish. And no matter what we caught, he would sit there and he would teach us how to clean the fish. We would clean it, and he would cook the fish. We would sit and eat. And whatever was left, we were able to take home. Favor. Master Barrett promised my family that when he died, he was going to give us our freedom. Not that we were hoping that he would die, but freedom. Well, unfortunately, one day, he does become very ill. And he calls my parents into his room, and he says to them that he has changed his mind. Instead of him giving us our freedom, he was going to separate us amongst his children. My mother, my sister, and I, we ended up living with his eldest child, William, who owned a tobacco plantation in Richmond, Virginia. Before I left, he called me into his room with his son, William, standing right there. And he says to me, Henry, as long as you are obedient, as long as you do as you are told, you will never be abused. You will never see a sight of any type of physical abuse. That favor. No one in my family has ever been abused. And he made sure that William understood that. He told William, he said, make sure no one is allowed to put their hands on Henry. Favor. Well, so we end up going to, after Master Barrett dies, we end up going to our designated areas. And I was in Richmond. And life for me in Richmond was very good, like I said. So I'm about 15 years old, and when I turned about 15, I decided that it's time for me to settle down and make a family for myself. So one day, I was just strolling through town. And while I was just strolling through town, I just happened to look across the road, and I saw the most beautiful woman I had ever seen in my life. It was like an angel from heaven just sat down and was sitting right over there. She was amazing. I stood there and I looked at her and I tried to get her attention, and I did. And I stood there and I, just winked at her, and believe it or not, she winked back. I was like, oh yes, I am in. So I decided to go after her. Well, Well, the minute I started to walk over there, guess what she did? She runs into the general store. But do you think that was going to keep me from going in? No, sir. I went right across the road. Well, in the process of doing it, I was bombarded with a whole lot of horses and carriages and people calling me all kinds of crazy names. I did not care. I was on a mission of love. And I want to cross over there. I go into the general store, and guess what? She's hiding. Don't worry. You not hide from Henry. When love hits, you will find her. And trust me, I did chase her all around the store. When she finally decided to stop running, we talked, we held hands, she allowed me to walk her home, and I knew then that she was the one. So, I don't know what the laws are here now, but in my day, if a slave wants to get married, he has to get permission from his master. So I go over to her master and I say, Master Lee, may I please marry? I forgot to tell you her name. Nancy. Huh, Nancy. Absolutely beautiful. So wait till you see her. She's absolutely beautiful. But anyway, so I asked, I said, Master Lee, may I please marry the beautiful Nancy? He looks at me and he says, Henry, I give you permission to marry Nancy, providing your master does not sell you. You see, I am a Christian gentleman, and I do not believe in the separation of family. I says, well, thank you very much, sir. Then I go over to my master, and I say, Master William, may I please marry the beautiful Nancy? He looks at me and he says, yeah, whatever. And I says, thank you, sir. Yeah. So we go and I tell her her master, and we jump the broom. Oh, yes, we jumped the broom. Life is going so well for us for the first year. Because that's how long it takes for Master Lee to sell my Nancy. And not only that, but that Nancy is being sold 3 more times. Now, there comes a gentleman by the name of Kroc. Now, Master Kroc wants to purchase my Nancy for his wife. My Nancy is being sold for $350, of which he only had $300. So he comes to me and he says, Henry, I would like for you to give me the $50 I need in order to purchase your wife for my wife. I look at him and I say, excuse me, sir? He says, yes, you give me the $50 I need in order to purchase your wife for my wife. And if you give me the money, this is what I'm going to do for you. I will allow your wife and the children to live in the place that you provide. You provide room and board and food and shelter. You provide all of those things. And if you're able to pay me $50 a year, and anytime I want to hire the wife out, if you're able to pay me, the wife and the children can remain with you for the rest of their days. Now, that's all I need you to do. You be willing? I thought about this. And I tell you, I have never heard of a white man coming to a slave and asking him for money. It was just unheard of. But I thought about it, I prayed about it, and guess what? I give him the $50. And for the next 10 years, my wife and children are living in a home that I provide. Imagine a slave living like a freeman. Every day I go to work, I come home, and there is my family waiting for me. My children run up to me and hug me and call out my name. It is absolutely wonderful. I have 3. I guess I have 3 children. I have 2 boys and a little girl. My oldest is a very good-looking, intelligent young man like his papa. His name is Henry. And then I have the little one, Matthew. That one is a talker. He talks constantly. Never he talks in his sleep. But then there is my child, the baby, my Rose. Oh, what a beautiful little girl. Oh, she is just the idol of my eyes. She reminds me of her mother. She is so beautiful. There's nothing I would not do for her. Well, the Browns are living quite good. Favor. Until one day, I was not quite aware of what was going on in the town. You see, This problem, this understanding that Cottrell and I had was good between the two of us, but for the other owners, it was not too good for him. You see, they made him feel very bad, to the point that one day he comes into my home and he says to me, Henry, I want you to give me a ridiculous amount of money. He wanted me to give him $5,000. I don't have $5,000. He says, I want you to give me the money. You give me the $5,000 and your wife and the children will remain with you for the rest of their day. Well, I did not have such money. And he knows that I did not have that money. I told him and I said, Master Cottrell, I don't have $5,000. I already paid you for the $50 for the year. I paid you last week for the hire last week, and I gave you extra money just in case if you come around asking me for more money. Where am I going to get such money? He said, money, I want money I shall have, and out of my home he goes. Well, when he's out running around and doing whatever it is he's doing, I look over and there is my wife grabbing the children and she's crying. And I knew why. Because we had thought that Master Cottrell was going to come and take one of the boys, if not both of them. They're worth a lot of money. So we cried, we prayed together. And the last sight I had of my wife and the children, them standing in the doorway, and my wife is waving at me, saying, Henry, please do not go. But I had to go. I had to go to work. There's nothing else for me to do. In order for me to go to work, I had to pay the bills. I went to work. And no sooner I get to work, I get word that Master Cottrell had gone into my home, removed my wife, the children, everything we owned, took it down to the auction block, and he sold it to another Christian gentleman, a Methodist minister from North Carolina. Well, immediately I go over to my master and I beg with him, and I plead with him to lend me the money so that I can keep my wife and my children with me. And do you know what he said to me? He stands there and he says, Henry, why are you so worried? Look on my plantation, sir. I have many beautiful women. Go pick one. Marry her. Have all the children you want. Nancy, children, they mean nothing. They're nothing. I could not believe that he would say such a thing. That my wife has nothing? My children are nothing? Well, I knew then that there was no talking anything from him. And I knew that there was no way that I was going to get the money in order to save my family. So, I decided to say my last goodbyes. I go back to the home, take whatever I could find, food-wise, and I go down to the jail where they are hiding. Well, they're not hiding there. That's where they're going. You see, a slave in our day that is sold, they are put in jail for holding until the next day or moving out day. And moving out day is a day that all of the slaves are paraded through the town for the last time to prove or let the rest of us know just how insignificant our lives are. So there I am, en route to the jail. While I am there, favor. A friend of mine comes to me and says, where are you going? And I tell him, he says, do not go. Because see, he overheard that the new master who purchased my wife and the children is waiting for me to show up so that he could throw me in jail and have me whipped for the first time in my life. Well, immediately I said, oh, I cannot go. So I tell him instead, here are the provisions for my wife and the children. You take them to the jailhouse and let my wife know what has happened. Well, immediately he rolls in there. Guess what happens to him? They thought he was me. They whip him and beat him immensely. Then they drag his body to my wife and to my children, and they say, is this your father? And of course, my wife and the children deny that that is the man. They deny that is me. So they whip him again and throw him out into the street. Only thing I can do now is hope and pray that I will see them on moving out there. So there I stand on the side of the road, hoping that I will see my wife and the children. And at first, you see the children who are on the carts, and they're paraded through the town. And I'm looking, and all of a sudden, I hear this voice, Father, Father, it's my oldest. And I go, Henry. I knew then that I could do nothing. And I'm worried about where is Matthew. I would love to hear Matthew just say anything. And who has my rose? Who is holding my rose? No one is supposed to hold my rose. No one is supposed to touch my rose but me. I am her father. No one is allowed to touch her. Where is my wife? And after the children go by, there are men. The men are coming. Chained hand and foot. Their heads hung low, and they are humming this horrible tune that I tried to get out of my head. Their mothers and daughters and cousins and sons are running up to all of the men, and they're crying, and they're just, I need to see my wife. I just want to see my Nancy just one last time. And as the men go by, I see the women, and I'm looking, and I'm running, and I'm looking, and I'm running. And there she is. And I grab out to her, and I say, Nancy, it is I, Henry. And I run to her, and I grab her, and I hug her. And for the next 5 miles, we walk hand in hand, crying, praying, not saying a word. And when I was told that I could no longer walk with her, she rips a piece of her apron and she hands it to me. And I waved to her and I said, we shall meet again in heaven. Well, needless to say, there's no reason for me to remain a slave in Richmond any longer. Oh, I was not disobedient, but I was determined to remove myself from such a place. So for the next 3 months, I prayed, and I asked God for guidance and direction on what to do. And you know what? He answered my prayer. Favor. He gives me the idea of nailing myself. I'm going to nail myself to freedom. Yes, nail myself. Well, my friend John, who works at the general store, knew someone in Philadelphia who could help us. So we write a letter and ask him if he would accept my box. Well, we'll get a response from him saying that yes, he would. Immediately, I get my money, I design my box, and I ship myself from Richmond to Philadelphia. I spent 27 hours in a box. 27 hours in a box. In the time that I was in that box, I cried. And I cried. I was wondering who is holding my wife? Where is my family? What am I going to do with my life? Now that I have no one, where? Lord, where are you guiding my hand? Where? When I arrived in Philadelphia, gentleman by the name of William Steele releases me from my box. And immediately from there, I end up in Boston. From Boston, that's when the slave catches, the law has changed. The Fugitive Slave Act has changed. I can no longer stay in this country. That's how I ended up in England. And that's how I am back here. This is not my home. Even though the war is over, I can smell the stench of inequality. I can smell it. I will not stay here any longer. I was hoping they would be different. I was hoping that I would reunite, but it is not going to happen. So, I leave again. Now, if you want to find me, you will have to find me in Canada. Goodbye, America.
Mr. Brown, thank you for speaking with us today. It's a blessing to be free. Can you let us know how it was as a child to be in the master's house as a house slave and then being separated from your family at the age of 14?
Well, to answer that question, I like I have said, favor. My family and I had favor. And what I mean by that is we weren't treated any better than any of the other slaves. It was just that because of the love and respect that my master had for my mother and father, we were just treated differently. And at times, I guess as a child, you really don't recognize that you're separated or treated any different from anyone else because you're a slave. You're still a slave. Whether you're a house slave or a field slave, you're still a slave. But it wasn't until I was 14 years old when I realized that my master, his last words to me were, "Henry, be obedient. Remain the course that you're going. Now, even though I'm leaving you and even though I'm giving you to my oldest son, no matter where you go, if you continue to do as you are told or as you are instructed, life will still be good for you." And I took the lesson, and even though I went to Richmond and I was on a tobacco plantation, I had to work a little harder, but I was still granted favor. So I don't see that I was treated, I might have been treated differently, but I did not allow my treatment to impede how I treated the other slaves, because we were still slaves. And I made sure that they didn't feel as though that I was superior to them, because I wasn't. I could be sold away just like they were. I could be treated as bad as they were, but for whatever reason, I was given favor. So it hurts. It really hurts. And not only even as a child, but even after my own children were removed from me and my wife. I can imagine how my mother and father felt when we were separated. Now I'm feeling that pain. And it is, trust me, it is a pain you never want to experience. Never.
Mr. Brown, you were inside a box so that your final journey could lead to freedom. What was going on in your mind? How did you deal with that voyage?
Madam, I tell you, there are some things I tried not to relive. And in that box, my faith was totally in God's hands. I was cooped up in the area only by 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet. So in other words, just to give you an idea, I was cooped up like this for 27 hours. No food, no drink, nothing. And all I could do was cry and pray, and cry and pray. Because the whole time I was in that box, I was thinking about my wife, my children, who was with my wife. In the 13 years that we were married, no one had any time with my wife other than me. And those times, those years, the 10 years that the children were with me when I had the home, no one abused my children. No one did anything to my children. My children were in my home with me and my wife. They were under my care. Now, they're under the hand of someone who is far worse than any slave owner that I have ever encountered. I don't know where they are. I cannot protect them. Can you imagine what that feels like? A father cannot protect his wife or his children from anything. As a slave, you have no power. At least when they were in Richmond with me, I had power. It's limited, but I had it. Now, I have nothing. And I'm alone. I don't know what God has in store for me. But I can tell you, those hours in that box, if it had not been for the faith that I had in God, trust me, I would not be standing here today. And I'm telling you, it's all because of His favor. Favor. But I tell you, I would not recommend this life for anyone. It is an abomination.
Mr. Brown, I see you have a strong faith in God.
Mm-hmm.
How did that sustain you when faith in God was used against the slaves?
Oh, let me tell you, madam. My mother made sure that I understood the difference between what the slave master wanted us to know about salvation and what is truth about in salvation. Even though we could read and write, my mother made sure that we were read the Bible constantly. And anytime that I would question who God was, I'll never forget. One day, Master Barrett come out and he told us to come inside the house because rain was coming. And because of the rain was coming, we just did what he told us to do. And no sooner did we go inside the house, thunder, storm coming, and the rain fell. And I said, wow, look what Master did. He said the rain was coming, and here comes the rain. And I go to my mother and I say, Mother, Master, God told us that the rain was coming, and the rain came. And she says, oh, no. He is not God. He is a man who's going to die like you and me. Okay? God is only up above. He is the Heavenly Father. And then she showed me in the Word who God was. So she made sure that not only myself, but my brother and my sister, that we understood, our feet were firm, and we understood who and what faith was. So yes, I know what the masses wanted us to know, and I know how they were treating and talking to the others, but I knew who God really was, and I knew that was how I was going to overcome any obstacle that I encountered.
Keith, awesome job.
Thank you.
Awesome job. Can you tell us where you grew up? I know acting is a part of your vocation, probably one of your vocations. Just tell us where you grew up and how did you get started with acting?
Well, Dawn, I grew up right here in Camden. I'm raised in Camden. I was born in Denver, Colorado, but I was raised here in Camden, went to Camden schools, went to Camden parochial schools, and it wasn't until, I would say maybe, as a child, I always wanted to be an actor. Always wanted to be an actor. I watched every Oscar, the Tonys. I even practiced my acceptance speech. I just knew I was going to get an Oscar award, and I practiced my acceptance speech year after year after year. It wasn't until maybe about 30 years ago when I really got into acting, and I realized the struggle of getting into it. A friend of mine, she and I, we were both acting, and of course, my mother was dead set against the acting thing because it was no money. And so those of you out there who are pursuing or would like to pursue the performance thing, let me tell you something. If it's not here, let it go. Because there's no money in acting unless your mother or father is already in making millions of dollars, and they have that opportunity to just throw you into one of their movies or something that they're doing to give you give you your start. But other than that, the rest of us, we got to drag and struggle, so don't even try about it. But I always had this speech that I wanted to share with my mom when I finally got a Tony Award, and I was like, hey Mom, look, I got a real job now. And of course, that was our biggest joke. But once I got here, I would say maybe about 20 some odd years ago, I had an opportunity to work in Philadelphia as a historic storyteller. And from there, I wanted to put on costuming and become an interpreter. And at that moment, I had the idea, or God gave me this, I guess I got my light bulb went off, that there are no black men telling black stories. And I said, that's what I want to do. So for the next 20 years, I focused on telling stories about black men. And I tell stories of men that most people don't know about. Of course, now, you saw my Matthew Henson, and this is Henry Box Brown, but have you ever heard of Bass Reeves? Bass Reeves was the first black U.S. Marshal west of the Mississippi, who was the most decorated U.S. Marshal in the history. He was responsible for arresting over 300 villains. No other U.S. Marshal has ever had that. And let me tell you, this is the most important part. He was illiterate, but he spoke over 17 Indian dialects. So that gave him that jump there. No one talks about Bass Reeves. So I tell stories like Bass Reeves, James Fortin, the wealthiest black man in American history. He was one of the wealthiest black men up until his death in 1842. And he was an abolitionist. He was a civil rights leader. He was one of the big names. And of course, I do William Steele and Dr. James Steele. And I mean, there are other men. There are 14 men that most people don't talk about. But these are stories that need to be told. So that, and the whole premise is to get people to see the other side of black men. See, we only know the negative side, but there's an other side of us that is positive and informative, and it's enlightening. So the more you know about who we are, then it's a better understanding of how you can more accept us into, not black history, but this American history thing. We have to get away from black history to American history because we're Americans. We're Americans. So that's how I got into it. I love it. Trust me, I love it. I'm not a millionaire, but trust me, I'm enjoying my day job. I'm enjoying my day job.
Thank you, Keith. Another question for you. Is there a certain character that you portrayed or a historian that you portrayed that you most identified with?
You know what? Everyone asks that same question, and I tell them no. Why? Because I can identify with every last man whose lives I portray. And the reason why I say that is because we all have something in common. We all have dealt with racism. We've all had to deal with struggle. We all had to deal with that inner demons in trying to come out to prove who we are as men, as Americans, as fathers, as brothers. And so we all struggle, we walk that same walk. And so when I'm telling their stories, I'm just telling their stories, but I'm living my life through their stories. So that when I'm performing, it's me coming through them. It's their words, but it's me struggling through it, letting you know that we have a kindred spirit. And that's what's important. And as an historical interpreter, anybody will tell you who's good or really good at what they do. Hey, if you can tell the story so that the audience walks away with like a wow moment, you didn't do your job. And that's not just a historical interpreter, that's an actor. But you got to separate the two. When I come up here, I'm not acting. I am telling my story through them. I'm telling their story through me, and I'm letting it live so that when you walk away, you go like, oh my God, man, Henry Box Brown was awesome. They forget Keith. They go like, oh, that was Henry. Henry was good. And That's the whole thing. It's like get them to see the person that I was portrayed at that time before I leave. Yep. That's my love. Thank you, Lord.
Just one more question.
Yes.
We're living in peculiar times, to say the least. In reflecting on the history of Blacks, and the endurance and the struggle and the successes, what has kept you going?
My faith. There is, listen, where I am now, oh boy, 20 years ago I was one angry little young, boy, I was full of anger. But even then, I knew that I was not getting any further without God's hand. And if I tell you that I persevered any other way without God there, I would be lying. And it is all by God's hand. God's hand has just guided me through every aspect of my life, and I have a better understanding of who He is based on the trials that I had to endure and that He brought me through. Am I perfect? No. Am I better than the next person? No. I am still a piece. I'm a vessel in the making, and every day there's a chip in me that keeps falling, and I keep, okay, Lord, you just keep going, and not that I don't feel the struggle and the pains that the other brothers are going through, or that other people are going through Black Lives Matter and through politics. I mean, I feel all of that pain because I have to, because I'm a part of it. I may not walk through it, but I'm still struggling through it, because the minute I walk out of my door, no matter where I'm at, I'm still to society a Black man, and that's it. They don't see Keith the actor, they don't see Keith the Christian, they don't see anything else, they just see a Black man, and they react to me in that manner. So I have to make sure that I am the person that I need to be. I need to make sure that God's love and His guidance works through me so that people see me, the person that I am, that compassion, that loving, that person that's just like the rest of them. The only difference is I'm Black. That's the only difference.
Thank you, Keith.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. God bless.